Today we're with Steve Seibert, our current board chair. Steve most recently served as the executive director of the Florida Humanities. He was elected to 2 terms as a Pinellas County Commissioner. Governor Jeb Bush tapped Steve to lead Florida's Department of Community Affairs. And in general, just a very philanthropic, intelligent person. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. That's perfect.
So tell us about you. Tell us, what did I not cover?
Well, I grew up in Pinellas County. I'm a Largo High School graduate. I'm a lawyer by trade and served in the county commission with Sally Parks, and we'll get back to Sally, I think, later in our conversation. And then I went to Tallahassee for 12 years, and that was a grand experience. It was great working for the state and doing a variety of things up there. So it's been a not a linear career, but a very fulfilling one. And came back here and really, truly thrilled to join the team at Pinellas Community Foundation.
So before we get into that, of that career that you had, what would you say is the leading, most positive experience you had, or most impactful thing that you did in all of that?
I think the most impactful, both maybe on the outside and personally on the inside, was as a county commissioner. And it would have been engagement in trying to solve the water battles in the greater Tampa Bay area, what's termed the Tampa Bay Water Wars. That was, weirdly enough, about 30 years ago. And I was a relatively young commissioner. I was part of a large group of people that tried to figure out this really complex problem of how do you assure potable water for 3 or 4 million people in a place that tends to go through drought cycles, as we are right now. And to the creation of a collaborative organization that's still around today to see if we can make that happen. And again, a large group of people, but we were successful in doing so. And so it was gratifying to go through it, but it was really hard. It was hard, and it has colored my view of collaborative efforts. And we can talk about that because it's part of being a board chair, I think, and this particular board for Pinellas Community Foundation, which is an extraordinarily talented board. And we will do so much better because we listen to each other, which was the lesson in large part of the Tampa Bay Water Wars. We had to listen. The people in Pinellas had to listen to the people in Pasco and Hillsborough, and vice versa. We had to listen to the environmentalists and the business community and the farmers and the utility directors. Everybody brought their skill and their background to the table, and that's precisely that's the lesson that I've just lived again in my career. That's how you get things done that last.
And that's why Jeb Bush said, and I quote, he is an outstanding public servant, and his ability to bring people together to achieve meaningful reforms will be his lasting legacy.
Nicely played. Yeah, it was an honor to work for Jeb, and in state government that it's only more important to listen to people.
But it plays a big role in nonprofits and at the community foundation as well.
It does. It absolutely does. And I'll just jump right in on that. So I joined this board like we all do, with certain passions, certain priorities. Mine happens to be literacy. I really feel strongly about literacy, and Duggan will tell you I came in with that on my mind, and by God, that's what we're going to do. And then I start listening to my colleagues who think that maybe affordable housing is a more pressing issue, or food security, or mental health. And all of these are critically important, but they have the same passion that I do for the things that they care about. And so I think it's been really important to back off a little bit and say, okay, well, let's talk this out. And how can we as an organization make a meaningful difference, not just in granting dollars out for what these wonderful organizations that we support, what they want to do. But if we have a direction on the board that we think is really important, how do we conclude what it is we should do? What is our lane going to be? And that can only happen by a conversation amongst the board and with our very talented staff.
So Sally Parks, I think, is the one who certainly asked you to serve on this board. Do you remember back to maybe one of your first board experiences, and maybe it was serving on the county commission as an elected board member, but remembering back to any of those experiences of serving, even on a nonprofit board, why you did that?
That's a really good question. When you're younger, you don't have as many choices when you decide to serve. When you get old and gray, you can maybe pick and choose a little bit more. So in this, I'll try to answer your question, but I'll move to Sally. So when we moved back to Pinellas after spending 20 years in Tallahassee, it's very important to remember people of significance. Sally Parks.
She was a person of significance in this county for sure.
Absolutely. I don't know of anyone I respected more than Sally.
Oh.
And we were elected on the same day. Sally and I both joined the county commission on the same day. And she pretty regularly told me what to do, and pretty regularly I did what she told me to do. Because it was always good advice. And so when I came back, I asked her, what should I do? Where should I put my charitable energies, in your opinion? And without hesitation, she said PCF, and she introduced me to Duggan, and helped make that happen. And she was totally right. And there are more than a few times I have thought about, what would Sally be recommending? How would she be voting? How would she approach an issue that we deal with here? Her presence still looms large, and that's the
influence.
Yeah, that's the nicest thing I can say. I think she passed away, as you know, a couple years ago, and but what a civic giant. And maybe that's the answer to your question. Why do you do it? One, you want to associate with people that care as deeply as you do. And that is true with both our staff and our board. One. And then I like giving out money. I think that's a good thing.
I know many people who don't.
Yeah, it's the right side of this equation and beyond. I've been on the supplicant side of wanting to get money, and that's not nearly as much fun as the joy of giving it out.
It is really fulfilling to be able to help nonprofits and satisfy the needs in the county right when they need.
Absolutely. Yep. All of that is true. So make a difference. Subject matter helps, so it's good. But I'm trying to think back in the day. I think people gravitate kind of both professionally in their jobs and in their charitable efforts. They gravitate toward the things they care about, and I've been lucky to be able to do that.
So caring about literacy, you talked about that sort of coming in at the beginning. What sparked that? And because that's not something that's of the moment. That's been around for a while. Why do you care so much about literacy?
Everything is tied together. So community health, whatever that means, the ability of a community to thrive, there are a lot of elements to that. The fact that people can live safely, that they have food to eat, that they have educational opportunities. All of those things matter. And a thread that never changes is the ability to read. And when that thread is broken, all of the bad things happen. You can't find work. You end up in jail. You can't afford housing. all of it's just surprising to me the number of things go south when one can't read. And it's not, and metrics are always difficult in all of these things, but this is a pretty clear metric.
Mhm.
And if a kid can't read by the 4th grade, when they get tested again in the 8th grade, things don't go well.
Mhm.
And when you look at prison statistics in Florida, I can't remember them specifically, but the incredible number of people that are in prison that are illiterate.
Mhm.
It sort of was one of those things. And having grown up in the Pinellas County school system, it's a natural to me that you could do, if I could do anything to help figure out how to help kids read would be a good thing. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Thank you.
So you've served on a good number of boards.
I have.
And what's something that you'd say makes up a good board? You say we have a good board, but
I do.
and I also say we have a great board.
Yeah, well, good. Good to feel it.
But what makes a good board?
There are 2 things that make a good board. And this is going to sound like a giant suck up, so please forgive me for this. But the most important thing is a good executive. And I've served on boards with less than a good executive director, and you find yourself fighting as a board member. You're fighting the internal battles, and that is not a place to be. I've been there, and I don't like it at all. We have an extraordinary executive director at the PCF. So there's that. The other one is the quality of the board members, and by quality I mean their ability to listen to each other and what they bring to the table. What skill sets they bring to the table. What's their background? Where have they been in their lives, and what have they learned? And I have no idea how many boards I've sat on in my life, a bunch. This is as good as it has ever been in either the private or public or charitable sectors. This is a superb board. A lot of humor, a lot of experience. People are willing to put in the time. They read the materials. They come prepared.
They ask good questions.
They ask good questions. I think they see, this is important to me. This can get dicey at times, but they see staff as partners, not as something separate from the board. It's just everybody's got their own lane, and staff has their lane, and the board has its lane. You have to stay in it, but you're still all working for the same.
Yeah, we're working together
You have to,
for the mission.
right?
Yes.
And that's not to say that we function as staff or that you all function necessarily as decision makers, but you got to work together. So I guess that's the third thing. So there you go. So those would be the 3 things. They're really important. Good executive director, a board that is civil and asks questions and truly brings their background to the table, and then this working relationship between the board and the staff.
I think that's one of the best things about our board, even over time, has been, I mean, and the board has vastly outnumbered staff at times here, but the ability of the board to work closely with staff in an appropriate way to move the agenda forward, whatever that is, but be able to not only work closely with staff, but both sides in the way that they respect each other's roles, I think has been fantastic. It allows more to be done.
Yeah. It's also a continuing obligation. You are never at the end. You are never in the spot you want to be at.
The bar keeps moving.
The bar keeps moving, the responsibility, because our responsibility is to the people of this county.
Yes.
Actually, it's to the people of this county and to generous donors that are trying to do the right thing. So how do you serve both of those the most effective way you can? And so you keep pressing it, you keep pushing it, you keep,
And the needs change in the county and things change and the dynamics change. So, our role has shifted over the years.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. That's pretty clear.
Let's talk a moment about philanthropy, and your philanthropy. What got you into giving in the community beyond service? But what got you into giving to organizations in the community? Where'd your start happen?
My parents. Both my parents, but particularly my mother, were very community focused. My mother sat on the Largo Library Board for years. She sat on another board I'm sure we'll talk about for years, and it just is part of your obligation as a citizen to give back. And we've been very, very fortunate to have some capability of giving. So it I don't know, it was never a question. So you
Philanthropy is often handed down from
is it?
parents. Oh yeah.
Yes, that's probably right.
I think that's where most of us have learned. I mean, did you? I feel like it was.
That's through family. And more my mother. My dad is generous too, but more of the learning of that came from my mom.
Yeah, my mom did. So you recently started a donor advised fund
I
with the
did.
Pinellas Community Foundation.
did.
Tell us about that.
Well, Doug and me.
I don't think that's true.
No.
I know way better than that.
So no, I actually retired fairly recently, and just because there's tax reasons, some stock came to me, and so it was a good idea from a tax standpoint.
Bunching.
It was. We had moved back to the area after being away for a while, and my charitable giving was sort of chaotic. It was a little chaotic, and so it just seemed to make sense, as now articulated by you two, of all of the reasons why a donor advised fund makes sense, and it makes enormous sense. So it's good for taxes, it's good for organization. You do all of the administrative work, and the records are clean and transparent. And so it's a really, in my mind, everyone should do it.
Me too.
They should all do it. And because for all of those reasons, but then there's this other reason that I still don't even know quite yet. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years of my life, or 15 years of my life. Hopefully there'll be 10 or 15 years of my life. And what happens to that family fund as I get older and my wife and I get older. I don't exactly know. I could see us ultimately putting those dollars more into the hands of PCF, and because I trust the judgment, your judgment, and have it live a whole lot longer than I do. But I don't know what that looks like yet. So,
but then there's also incorporating family into your donor advised fund and in your children, and allowing them to be able to make decisions and continue your legacy, your family legacy.
Yeah, no, it's true. And again, we don't quite know what that looks like yet, but the vehicle is there. So now I have this working vehicle that makes my life easier and that I'm very comfortable with, and what we do with it remains to be seen. And I think that's very cool. So I've been thinking about this a bit because because Meg makes me think about this. And there are a lot of people, I believe, that have moved to Pinellas County that come from someplace else. And they may have charities that they've supported in, Akron or Cincinnati or Chicago. And those are still perfectly legitimate, but they've come here and they've grown to love the community that I live in. And what a vehicle to be able to say, with discretionary assets that you have, now it's time to invest in Pinellas.
Yes.
And I know that's I know at some level it's a very powerful argument. And I think I know you're working on it, but I'd like to help work on that because I know it's there. I just know there are people that are probably sitting there saying, I'm not sure how to invest in this community. I don't know it. I don't know it like I knew the 35 years I lived someplace else. right?
One of the ways people can learn is fund holders get to join us on our twice yearly bus tour, nonprofit bus tours. What are those like?
Those are fun. Those are very fun. And even when you know the charities you're visiting, this
Right.
last tour, right? I knew all three charities fairly well and lived here a long time, but I didn't know a lot of that stuff. And be sitting on a bus, not just with board members and staff, but with funders, that was great. I love those bus tours. People should join
Interesting
us.
conversations.
They're very interesting conversations, and you're kind of wondering, why are you here? And then we find out. So no, it's a grand idea. I'm glad we're doing it, and I think we need to keep doing it.
And there's room on the bus too.
There is room on the bus.
We can invite far more people to join us if they'd like to.
So why should someone start a DAP at PCF?
For all the reasons I just mentioned, it helps you organize your charitable giving. And then there are, and as you've articulated many times, you really can do some tax planning in this process. So that's a really good thing. So the relationship between PCF and, the legal community that does estates and trusts and the accounting community that does the same thing is really, really important. Another set of connections that we make a lot, but we could be doing more. And I sense there are probably many professionals out there that don't know what we do and are not paying attention for their clients, and it would be valuable for their clients.
So along the lines of family, what have you done to start passing on some of that legacy? Do you talk to your kids about philanthropy, or have you over time?
For that grandbaby, are you already?
Now that we have our first grandbaby, yes, they're not quite there yet. My son, one son is 28, and his mind is at getting his career started and getting a 401k started. But in both son and daughter-in-law's case, they have their families also had history of giving, so I know it's coming. But I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think they'd be I know they're very glad to know that we have a fund.
Yeah.
To your earlier point, I think it's important that there's something there, and they don't need to necessarily look at the wills and trusts to understand that there's a thing to help this giving continue.
That's great.
So looking ahead in your role as chair of the board, what most excites you about PCF or the role that we play in the community? What are you really jazzed up about?
I'm jazzed up in two areas. I've always believed that there is a coordination role or a collaborative role that a respected, neutral, not crazy organization can play in helping solve problems. That sometimes there's value in just calling people to the table to talk through really hard problems. I know the PCF can play a role like that. I know that they have in the past. I know you have in the past. Sometimes it's not necessarily bringing money to the table. There are a lot of organizations that have more than we do to actually put dollars into the battle. But I don't know of anybody that has a more pristine reputation that can legitimately call people into a room without an agenda. You're not, and I think PCF, I think that's a really important role. I don't know where yet that can really play. The communities face really, really hard problems, and those problems can become devastating. Well, we've seen it certainly in storm events, and I was thinking more about man-made problems, but where maybe we're the first person in the scene that says, okay, everybody calm down. What are we going to do together? And so I see that role for PCF. I don't, again, know quite what it looks like, but I think we should play it more.
And I know you have a second point, but we got a little taste of that this year when we did our check presentations for operating grants. We invited 5 different organizations to come together. Everyone sort of talked about what they did, and we watched them say, "Oh, you have a mobile shower unit? We would love it if you would come over." And we watched organizations come together, and convening and the power of convening people. It's incredible.
I
It is-
love that. I love that. That's exactly what I'm talking. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And we see it more because we operate grants, right? So I've sat on grant committees where you're, by the 18th grant you've looked at, you see all these connections, but they don't know about that because they do their wonderful work as best they can with the limited resources that they've got with blinders on, and we don't have those blinders. So
But organizations don't need to all reinvent the wheel.
exactly.
And I think that is something that that was struggle with. There are so many nonprofits now. There are dozens of new ones every month.
Absolutely. No, that's right.
And so maybe, helping these nonprofits figure out how they can work together is really key. And I'm excited that the board is excited about this as well.
You absolutely, you could not have said that better. That's exactly right. And then you multiply your impact, right? When you're all not doing the same thing. And because there just isn't enough money to go solve all of these problems. So maybe a more efficient use of our resources is a more effective way of solving problems.
So going back for a moment to water doors.
Yeah.
Was there a neutral party that opened up convening, or what was it that finally, besides crisis or potential for long-term crisis, what really made it start to gel and work? Because that was a long time, long building problem.
Yeah, the answer is no. And that's why it took 3 years of negotiation. 3 years of negotiation because there wasn't a neutral party. I was thinking about that. I'm speaking on the water wars this week. And I was thinking, the exact question was in my mind of, I remember as a participant in the battle, I was a county commissioner, so I was clearly not neutral. I was representing one of those groups that was in litigation. And I remember pondering who in the greater Tampa Bay area had the intellectual and kind of moral persuasion to help bring the parties together, and no one did. There wasn't that player at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that in more than one battle in my life where you kind of cast your vision out, who can call us to the table, and there wasn't anyone there. So we had to kind of do it as adversaries, and that added a whole lot of time and somewhat wasted energy to finally find the common ground.
When it started to finally gel for people and really get some traction behind it, what was it that sort of turned the tide on that? Is there something?
There were a couple things. One was a recognition, I think broadly, that litigation was not going to solve this problem, because the law could be changed at any given time that would alter the litigation. And once we realized that the legislature could go any number of ways, there's nothing worse than relying on the Florida legislature to solve a problem. It does almost,
especially a very local problem.
A very local problem. They would not take the time and energy. They couldn't. They're just not built that way to deal with the details of something as complex as water supply. So the last thing we wanted to do at one point, our legislators said to us, either you solve it or we'll solve it for you. That was not a place any of us wanted to be.
Or created some urgency there.
Oh, absolutely it did.
Mhm.
And in the water wars, the urgency was also the fact that we were running out of water, that people would turn on their spigot and it wouldn't work. There wouldn't be a resource in there. And that was also not, that was a reality that we were dealing with. So
What was the organization that was created from this?
Tampa Bay Water.
Oh, okay.
Tampa Bay Water was formed with deep compromises.
Mhm.
I mean, remarkable compromises, including more expensive water, but arguably water that was drought proof, or at least way more drought proof than where we were.
Mhm.
And so the structure of a different kind of entity was hard to get to. So it was these urgent pressures sort of made it happen. And then, and maybe back to an earlier point about our board, then it was the combination of people of goodwill.
Yeah.
That we're not necessarily ever going to be best friends, but that we're decent people. And
Well, working together respectfully.
yeah, and so an example of that would be there was when you were over pumping water during a drought time, there was environmental damage that was really extreme. It wasn't happening in Pinellas because we weren't pumping from Pinellas. It was happening in Pasco and Hillsborough. But I could go up to Pasco County if it didn't shoot me in the way. I could go up to Pasco County and I could see cypress domes falling and lakes drying up. Nobody wants that.
Right.
It's not right. And no one on our board wanted that. At the same time, some of the answers were incredibly expensive and people need water. And so tripling the cost of water, no one wanted to see that either. You couldn't do that. So we had to figure out kind of a balancing it. And I only go into detail on that only because that's the life we all live in. That's what we're all trying to figure out, what's a balanced, thoughtful way to solve problems.
Mhm.
And to do that requires a certain amount of public humility. You've got to just
Compromise.
yeah, you do. Yeah, and those words aren't it's almost a dirty word
I know.
today, and that's such nonsense that it's a dirty word. It is the core of a democracy made of diverse people. It compromises absolutely essential to the functioning of a democracy. And if you believe differently, you can't possibly believe in the American experience.
Mhm.
So anyway,
I agree.
you've asked earlier kind of what I kind of the thinking I'm bringing to the board and to the role as chair. It would be that. It would be, we just have to be a little more humble in listening to all of our constituent parts to figure out how to move forward.
So we took a little bit of a long route, but then you had a second thing that really
Yeah, that you were excited.
excites you about the role.
Yeah,
as
good.
the chair.
Okay, I remember. So we're in the process, as you all have led us to, of trying to figure out where we might have specific impact in solving one or more community problems. And for the reasons I've mentioned earlier, like we're not this gigantic organization that has unlimited dollars to toss at a problem. We've got to be really thoughtful about that. We have to be thoughtful about what the issue is, and we got to be thoughtful about where we can actually make a difference and how we measure that. So So I'm excited about the process we're in the middle of right now, we being the board and staff, and trying to figure out what that might look like. Where would it be? Is it, I just use this, if we, let's say, wanted to take on some sort of educational effort, literacy may be part of it, but it could be a lot of things. Is it something you try to do in concert with the school board, for example, or not? Is it something you try to do in a very limited geographic location where you can get really granular on what the problem is and how you're solving it? Or not? Is it,
There's so many options.
there are, or is it something you don't take on at all? Or do you partner with an organization that has shown great success in solving a problem and simply utilize their expertise and maybe fund them to go do more than they're currently doing? All of these are possibilities, and we're trying to think it through. My gut feel is that we should do this, that we should try to tackle a specific issue or a couple of issues over the course of years, and maybe develop a working model as how it could be done and how it could be replicated more broadly. That could be incredibly exciting. But this is difficult. It's really hard to settle on what that is. It's hard to have an impact quickly. So there's a time frame here. I mean, is it okay to say we're going to put $500,000 a year into a project, and we'll get back to you in 5 years from now to see whether we made a difference or not? That, as you know, that can be difficult. So I'm excited about having the conversation with this talented board and talented staff to try to, and with the people in Pinellas. I mentioned earlier, we have those organizations that we support that have a lot of expertise in some of these issues, and we have funders. And I'd love to go to a big funder and say, we are really grappling with this. Would you be our partner in approaching whatever this problem is? And I know you do this. I know that's where we are, but then you have force multipliers. Then you're suddenly really making a difference, and you're incorporating a lot of different voices.
That's the key. I mean, we keep getting back to that. That's the key.
We do.
Incorporating a lot of different voices.
Yeah. Which again is not normal. This is not how things often get done.
Yeah.
It's not as normal. So let me ask you a question.
Go for it.
So we were, I think you've told me, we were one of the first 50 community foundations in the country. I remember Mr. Richards. I was a young guy.
Our founder, Ralph Richards.
Thank you. That's the founder. And he was an important person to my mother. She held him in very high regard. And but I remember this. So when we were founded, is what we're talking about now consistent with what Mr. Richards was thinking in the late 60s as he was putting together this organization?
I think it's very consistent with what he was thinking and the people he was assembling around the table. I think it's the new generation of that, but the principles are the same. The principles of gathering community voices around the table, respecting the diversity of the community, of thought, of leadership, of money, and bringing that to one place to make a difference on something or many somethings. I think it's very consistent with what he was attempting and did help create at that time.
It's pretty cool.
Yes.
Your mom knew him. That's cool. You have a long history then.
Yeah. And I'll just follow up that and mention College Fund, which is an organization that PCF still supports and has.
Well, they're great people.
They're great people. But so my mother sat on that board for at least 40 years.
Oh.
Wow. She was an original board member. college fund, and
And they provide scholarships to Pinellas County students going to college.
going to college. And when it started, I remember because I was around the schools at the time, it was real hands-on. Mom would go to Largo High School and tutor kids to take the SAT. That was what her civic engagement was. There were some dollars that came with it, but that wasn't. It was never a large organization, but it was real hands-on. A student that just needed a little help. I remember her telling stories about kids that might go to Emory or someplace where it was a little colder, and they'd never had a coat before. They'd never had a winter coat, and you could go and buy a winter, and a bus ticket, and help raise the SAT score so they could get into it. Right? It was that simple and basic, and it's still the same in that particular organization. Has no paid staff.
Correct.
Right. That is one of the few that I've ever seen where board members actually do the day-to-day work.
They do, and they still have a very committed board. They still are mentoring students. Their goal is also when they connect with the student to also provide scholarship support for 4 years.
Yeah.
If they go for 4 years, but they check in regularly with students, it carries a pretty impressive legacy in the community, and especially that it's been around for as long as it has.
Right.
All volunteer driven and continues to be very active today.
So to close the loop on this, when you asked about where the motivation came from, so my parents are both deceased, but for years, I can't tell you the number of young people that would drop by the house who were now nurses. They had families. They would bring their kids. They were law enforcement officers. They were, in one case, a lawyer that I do. They had done really well, and they just came back to pay their respects, right? So
You saw the impact that philanthropy made.
and it was very personal. It wasn't
Absolutely.
right.
That's cool.
So there you go. That's the thinking.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
This
is
has been
fantastic.
This has been fun.
It's been fun.
It's
Yes.
fun talking to you.